Albert Schweitzer. At times, our own light goes out and is rekindled from another person. Each of us has cause to think with deep gratitude of those who have lighted the flame within us. And one of those who lights the flame in this community is Monica Dupuy, who is our speaker this morning on the subject of help for youth homelessness. She's the director of the Nevada Youth Empowerment Project, a privately funded nonprofit based in Reno. And under her leadership, the project operates the Community Living Program, CLP, which is a 1 to 2 year program for 14 beds, housing-based independent living curriculum. And this targets young women between 18 and 24, as I understand it, experiencing housing instability and providing them with necessary tools and opportunities to build stable lives. She's widely recognized as an expert on homelessness, and well, since 2013, you've led the, in partnership with the city, the annual homeless youth count, and that provides important data for programmatic decision making throughout the county, right? She also it also led to opening a youth shelter in 2020, and she's also the co-author of the white paper entitled "Addressing Homelessness in Washoe County," and this offers detailed analysis and what she calls actionable recommendations for tackling homelessness in this region. She also played a key role in securing a free lease on city property to provide low-income housing for graduates of the CLP. She also founded the Truckee Meadows Housing Solutions. This initiative aims to transform blighted city property into an intergenerational complex where graduates of the CLP and low-income seniors can coexist, paying no more than $500 a month. It's still $500 a month, yeah, okay. And this is the product known as the Gen Dent. Has it broken ground now?
No, not yet. We're still working in an easement issue right now, but we're very close. We're very, very close.
All right, so all of this important work has led to numerous awards and accolades. She's a city superhero,
Yeah.
a Reno Riveter, a Ruby Award winner, a Woman of Achievement, a Stand Plus Catalyst, and one of the top 20 under 40. These reflect her unwavering commitment to addressing homelessness in our community. And now we're going to hear about homelessness in our community from Monica Dupuy. Thank you, Monica.
Thank you. What a nice introduction. Thank you so much.
Well, you wrote most of it.
Well, I appreciate you mentioning so much of it. Usually it's something I just send in to kind of prove myself, and then it's not really talked about. So thank you. You reminded me of a lot of things that I've done over the years. So I was offered to come here today and talk about youth homelessness. And so it gave me a good opportunity to put a current and updated report together on what's going on with the homeless youth in the state of Nevada in our county, Washoe. So I'm here to share that with you today and hopefully give you some inspiration of maybe where you can step in and be part of the solution. So our youth are in crisis right now. Next slide, please. And so I thought I would put together a few different slides on what are homeless youth. Interestingly enough, right now, that HUD defines homeless youth as individuals who are 24 years of age and younger and who are not part of a household with someone older than 24 years old. So that's the definition that the shelters use, that funding agencies use. You would see the school district using a little bit different of a definition, but this is what we use in terms of housing. And when we talk about youth homelessness, we're talking about young people under 24, Gen Z in particular. So when I started Nevada Youth Empowerment Project, we were working with millennial youth. We're now working with Gen Z youth. So this is an entirely different generation that is motivated, that is educated in an entirely different way than the previous generation. So that is something that's really important to recognize, and we don't really talk about that when we talk about homeless youth. We just kind of generalize them, and they're a different generation now. So for someone like me who's 50 years old, and I started doing this work when I was 21, I was working with millennial youth who were close to me in age. Now I'm working with Gen Z youth who are not close to me in age. And so it's important that I recognize that and that I make adjustments in the way that I work with the youth that I run into now. And so youth homelessness isn't just about a lack of shelter, it's about a lack of opportunity, security, and basic human dignity. We currently have, next slide, please. We currently have over 4 million homeless youth in the nation. And in Washoe County, it's about 600 to 700. Most of those youth are part of families, or they are in detention centers, in temporary shelters. The unaccompanied youth, which would be the youth over 18 to 24, we call them unaccompanied youth. We're only seeing about 60 of those in Washoe County.
How do you track the couch surfers?
Well, I was going to talk about that in the slide a little further down, but I can just mention it to you. Dr. Murphy had said that we used to do the count. We did the count for 8 years. It culminated in opening up the youth shelter in 2020. The last year that we did the count was 2021. We stopped doing the count because it's unfunded and the data of the count is not being used to drive solutions right now. And so we used to count about 80 to 120 youth a year, and majority of them were couch surfers. They were not meeting the technical definition of HUD's homeless youth, but they were couch surfing, and that I can talk about that a little bit more, but that's leading into the reasons why they are housing unstable, and I'll talk about that a little bit further down. But I wanted to say the Gen Z are born between 97 and 2012. This is the largest generation of homeless youth we've ever had. Okay, so millennials, we had less. Prior to that, we had less. And so that's something that we need to pay attention to. We have far more homeless youth in the South than we do the North. We got ahead of it. They're just getting on their problem now. We've been working on ours now for a few years, and so we're a little bit ahead of them. Next slide. And so taking a look at the groups within our homelessness, these are the groups that are disproportionately affected: African American and Indigenous youth. We have Latino youth facing housing insecurity is much higher, and female and LGBTQ plus youth are at a much higher risk. So these are the folks that are disproportionately affected within youth. This is what you would look at to say, what kind of specialized programs should we create? What type of hyper focus should we have within the population? That's how this kind of data should drive solutions, but I don't see that happening. Next slide, please. So this is 2021 homeless youth pit count. This is the last count that NYEP conducted. We surveyed 16 youth. That's how many we were able to find in all the parks and streets out there. So we were looking for what they call unsheltered youth who are not staying at our local shelters, the ones that are, sleeping in buildings and tents, in cars, in places that people aren't meant to be sleeping. And so not terrible, 8 unsheltered youth. So even 8 of those 16 that we found said that they did have a place to sleep. So I think this is the type of stuff that it just tells me we need more information. We need more. And we'd have to make an effort to go out there and start surveying and screening again. Next slide. This is the data that we have on homeless youth. I know that's small. You might have to grow your screen out on maybe, I don't know if they can save this or if you send it out, but if you can zoom in on this. This is the Comprehensive Client Support and Achievements Report out of the annual Eddie House report for last year, our local shelter. And really, they're just capturing their interactions and their outputs. So we don't know how many people are graduating from high school, are securing their own housing units, are saving any type of money. There's just no outputs that are reported out to the community. So I'm not sure if they're collecting that data inside, but those are the types of things that we would want to look at to give us an idea of what types of skill building that we should focus on. We would decide as an organization, what do we want to see people achieve here? And then we would focus our efforts around those efforts and make sure that we measure to make sure that they're achieving those indicators. So this is where we could maybe do better. We can identify some outputs that we can, or some outcomes, not these outputs, but that's something worth looking at. If you want to know more about what's going on with homeless youth, I would start with the annual report of the local youth shelter, and you can kind of see how they capture success, how they're reporting out, and it would give you an idea of what other questions that you might want to ask, or I think the answers would be important. Next slide. And what's driving youth homelessness is pretty much the same what's been driving youth homelessness for the last 30 years. It's family instability, like conflict and rejection, mental health issues, aging out of foster care, and the economic instability has just grown drastically over the last, 10 plus years. Between the haves and the have-nots, and with young people coming into the economy, they're one of the most vulnerable populations, and they are just struggling in it.
Can we interrupt you, Monica?
I'm not sure how they wanted to do it, if they wanted to wait till the end or.
Could you did say something about runaways? Like percentages, like how many do we think are contributed? Like runaway girl mainly. Is that significant for homeless youth?
I would be speculating. I don't have a current, we're not currently collecting that data in the state of Nevada. None of the agencies are that work with those types, and they're not reporting it out. So we go off the national statistics, and we can't get the state statistics. And, it's always 60+%, of the runaways that are going to end up homeless. But I don't know exactly how many youth are running away, but I can tell you we have a trend happening right now in the Gen Z youth, which is they don't want to follow rules. They don't want to meet expectations. So they have homes to go to. They just don't like what they have to contribute in that particular relationship. So they would rather go to maybe a facility where they can walk in and they don't have to do anything for what's being given to them. They could take off, come back 2 days later. There's just not a lot of reciprocation going on in that relationship. And they prefer that. And so we have to talk about that. We have to talk about how to get down to the kids who are truly homeless, who truly have nowhere to go if that place was shut down, and truly are at the whim of the streets, versus kids who just don't want to listen to their parents. We're really not working hard to make those differentiations, because at the end, agencies use those numbers, the greater numbers, to get more funding. So to them, it's like, oh, great, we have 20 more kids coming in today. We have an increase of this much more kids coming into the facility, but we're not getting any data on these kids to really understand, are these mentally ill kids that need mental health treatment programs? Are these kids who are parenting, or pregnant, and need, familial type of supportive programs? Are these LGBTQ kids that need maybe a trans home, or they need some behavioral programming? We're not getting into the details of what those needs are. So it makes it really hard for us to realize the solutions that need to come.
Few slides. It's a CLP program. How do you have an abundance of those you can provide for kids that are truly homeless?
So our program has 14 beds. I believe that our local youth shelter also has what they call it a CLP program. It's much different than ours. I think it's 6 months long. And they try to encourage the kids who come into the shelter beds to to go into their CL program, but we always have vacant beds, always. So it would be hard to make the case for creating more CLP beds when the beds that we have are vacant. So the disconnection is that we have kids who don't want to follow rules and don't want to meet expectations. They just want a place to stay. They want the food to eat. They want they want you to do everything for them, but they don't really want to do anything back in return. So that's a behavioral health type of issue that we would need to work on. And that would take some skill of us sitting down and going, okay, how can we motivate? How could we inspire? How can we better engage, connect? And so those talks would have to happen, and that work would have to be done by the adults. Yeah. Next slide. All right, and so I wanted to talk a little bit about what's driving youth homelessness from the system perspective, because we're always talking about what's driving youth homelessness from what the youth need, like failure of education, don't have a bus pass, they don't have the right clothes, they don't have a place to stay. But in all actuality, that kind of folds back into how the system is failing, because these are kids. The adults should be taking care of, the adults should be solving this problem for the kids. This is not a problem for the kids to solve. And so there's a lot of failures in the child welfare system. There's inadequate mental health services. There's a lack of affordable housing. And when I say affordable, I mean prioritized housing, where we are getting down to going, what can they afford? 500 a month? Well, then it has to be 500 a month. It's like, we have to have these conversations that get us out of this vague, affordable housing type of discussion that the developers really like to keep us with in these terms. Because we're like, oh, affordable housing, that sounds wonderful. Oh, 2,500 more units of affordable housing, that sounds great. And then we find out later that it's not for people that are making 10 or 11,000 a year. It's for people who are making $60,000 a year, and everyone deserves housing. But we have been not balancing out what we're building for the folks over here versus what we're building for the folks over here. It's like we have to swing some of our housing resources to build for people who frankly can't pay, who you're not going to make any profit off of at all. That's what's going on with the CARES campus, is that we have a front door but no back door. So even when they finish building the 200 to 300 permanent supportive housing units, once people fill those units, that's it. They're permanent. That's permanent housing. Those won't vacate unless they die or run away. So that means that those shelter beds will fill again, and we'll have nowhere to send people again. And so there has to be a lot of advocacy at the state, and I don't see this on the Dem side or the Republican side right now, for prioritized housing to the poor. I hear kind of vague stuff about out-of-state developers and foreign entities are coming in and buying stuff up, and that's what's ruining it. That is not what's ruining it. We will not designate funding for people who can't pay. We won't designate funding to projects that put off no profit. And so we have to start doing that at a really rapid rate, because we have about 33,000 people right now in Washoe County who really cannot afford to pay for housing unless it's drastically subsidized.
There has been a little bit of talk about rent controls, but you didn't hear about it very much, and that talk went away.
Well, that's interesting, because when I see politicians, whether it's on either side, start talking about rent control, everybody gets quiet. No one wants to talk about that. And then when they talk about high rent, they kind of need to look at themselves and their friends, because they're all real estate owners. And I would bet they're all charging what they believe the fair market is. They're all, in it to make some money. But that's what's
in the last 2 years.
Yes, but it's the haves that own everything. And so they all have to kind of self-reflect and look within and go, do I really need to make $3,000 off this 3-bedroom house that I could really get away with $1,500 and rent it? We have to kind of look at that greed that we're individually doing, because rent control, I don't think is going to happen. People don't want their private property messed with. They don't want people telling them what they can do. I just don't think it'll go in that direction. And so the unfortunate thing about what's driving homelessness and allowing young people to grow from a child in homelessness to an adult in homelessness, what I'm seeing, and yet with the girls there, I see them come in and they're malnourished. They either aren't eating enough good food or they're eating too much terrible food. So they're in really bad shape physically. They're weak. They don't have a lot of muscle strength. They don't have a lot of wherewithal. They can't put up with a lot. They have untreated illnesses that they've been just putting up with. They have disabilities that they haven't gotten attention for. They have unmanaged mental illnesses. Even if they're being treated somewhere, they're not following the doctor's recommendations. And so without the stability to recover, in like a stabilized place like Enya, a supported place like Enya, they'll remain isolated, alone, and they'll just continue to deteriorate, which is how we're seeing, 22, 23-year-olds over at CARES campus with virtually no teeth in their mouth. Their teeth have already rotted out of their mouth. Like, it is way worse than it was when I got involved with this work. The deterioration is happening much more quickly. The long-term toll is that they're just stuck in homelessness from childhood to adulthood. And you can forget their education and career prospects if they get stuck. There's no amount of like mentoring that you're going to be able to do with them to get them over what those adverse experiences, how much damage they do to them inside. They simply can't handle being redirected. They can't handle being challenged. They don't believe they can do hard things. It really stunts them forever. And so this is such an important thing that we work on. That's why it's kind of shocking to me in this community that we have no prevention efforts going on. It's all intervention right now. We're intervening with adult homelessness, and we're not really talking about youth homelessness. We're not focusing on intervention. And that's really where I would be focusing. Knowing what I know, I'd be saving the ones from chronic homelessness instead of putting all my effort into chronic homelessness. And so we literally have a pipeline from our local youth shelter to the CARES campus. So right now, when difficult youth show up at our local youth shelter, if they don't follow rules and they don't want to participate in the programming, they're kicked out over to the CARES campus. So we have kind of a pipeline of those chronic homeless youth kids going right into adult homelessness, because the types of supports that are out there right now are more for kids who are responsive to them, not for when they're not responsive. And that's where behavioral health comes in. That's where you would want to see a lot of mental health staff. So next slide. And so this is what's holding the youth up from their perspective. Their unemployment is tied to them not having any work experience, not having any pre-employment skills, like being able to take direction, being able to hear direction, and ask questions like, did you mean this? Asking about feedback. There are just certain pre-employment skills that when these youth don't have and they go into a job, the very first challenge they have, they quit, or they handle it in a way that leads them to not having a job anymore. The education disruption. It's hard to go to school when you don't have anywhere to live. It's hard to prioritize education when you don't have anywhere to live. And then the exploitation and the vulnerability, just the nature of being homeless puts you in the streets around lots of other people who are at their lowest point in their life, puts you around very desperate people who would be willing to exploit the youth for their benefit. And so it's just a dangerous situation altogether for them to remain in. So we need to get past this idea that their challenge is a bus pass or clothing and move to deeper supports and interventions. Mentally, these kids are suffering. They carry the scars of this trauma for the rest of their lives, and constant dangers are their reality. It destroys their health, their future, and their sense of worth. So leaving them out there is not a good thing. Or just waiting for them to come in is not a good thing. Next slide. So this is what I would recommend, building a system for homeless youth that has youth-specific low-cost housing. So the housing specifically designed for youth, meaning that it's manned with staff that understand how to work with homeless youth, that the affordability level is what homeless youth can afford, whether it's 0 to a sliding scale up to what their job possibly pays them and a percentage of what they can pay, and they can work their way up to paying like a fair market or getting into a low income unit in the community. They need safe and stable environments. So they need these environments to be kind of predictable, basically, so they can feel safe, so they can get vulnerable, so they can be willing to put themselves out there in healthy ways. so they can open up and talk to the positive adults around them who can help them process. And the accountability and resource use, this is so important, making sure that what you're giving them, what you're providing to them is being rooted somewhere. And they're not stuck in the get, keep, grow cycle, just getting all the time, getting. That's where I see a lot of youth just get stuck, where they're always having to go in and ask for the same thing over and over and over. We need support helping them how do you secure that resource? How do you root it in so you can keep it and then you can grow it? So you're not just starting over all the time. Without basic needs stabilized, effort towards housing, mental health, and education will fall apart. So anytime I see efforts where we're encouraging homeless youth to go to school without having a place to live, I know that's gonna be impossible for most of them. There might be a couple kids that are going to be successful in spite of the world, in spite of what comes at them, they're gonna overcome. These kids don't need our pity. They need affordable housing, mental health support, and real opportunities to break the cycle. So when I was mentioning before how now that I'm in this, I think about it so differently than when I was out of it. But that's one of the things, my mind rarely goes to feeling sorry for them. It always is going to how can I grow a protection or resource? How can I empower them? Because this is like a real problem that they're facing every single day. And just kind of getting stuck in a feel sorry for them does not do anything at all to help them. And matter of fact, it probably enables them in some way because they've used their story to take advantage, to manipulate. So helping them get off of that and get their mind into a growth mindset of what can I do? How can I be empowered about my own life is such a gift that no amount of money can pay for. If you can empower them in their growth mindset instead of the poverty mindset, it's so powerful. Next slide. And so these are the critical next steps. We need adequate mental health support in the state. I saw we just did a big mental health conference. It would really be nice to see the momentum of that conference be matched in energy with the lobbying at the state. If we really care, we would be lobbying at the state for money and for resources into youth mental health. And then education and school completion. You got to have a greater skill base to get into more wages. That's the big push for education. It doesn't have to be done through the college, but they're going to have increased skills in order to be able to make enough to live in this city. It costs a lot to live in Reno, and minimum wage isn't cutting it. And so how do you help them get into a higher skill level so that they can get into a higher wage level? And so you might start them with pre-employment training. You might start them with a volunteer job, and then we're putting them into a low skill job, and they're learning that, and then they're working into a higher skill job, and they'll need mentoring and hand-holding through that. They don't just figure that out on their own. And then the skills training for employment, it goes back to that pre-employment training as the emphasis that I could put on you, is that it's really their attitude and their behaviors when it comes to work and that reciprocation. They'll lose the job fast because they don't have that. And every employer costs them about $3,500 for a bad hire. So then they get turned off hiring homeless youth at some point because they're like, they never work out. So we just did some work with them, some pre-employment training before we sent them out to the jobs. That would really help them out and the employer out. So youth have deep trauma, and without mental health support tools, they can't move forward. Therapy and treatment are essential, but so is the emotional and social support for people who care outside the clinical setting, who hold them accountable, push them to grow, and recognize their trauma and walk alongside them with it. So that's the stuff as community members that we can do for youth. They'll go to their therapy, they'll do their treatment. We have no idea what's talked about in there, but what we can do is help hold them accountable, not feel pity for them, but hey, how did school go yesterday? Are you still going to school? Need any help for me around that? Do you need any tutoring? What are your grades like? You've been showing up all the time? Do you like your teacher? Like building a rapport with them around the things they're responsible for so that you can talk to them and help them grow their sense of responsibility and sense of self. Next slide. And so this slide I put together just to kind of show you how you can kind of look at a staff structure and see where their program focus is at.
Is that Eddie House?
So this is the local youth shelter here.
Okay.
And again, you're gonna have to probably zoom in on these titles if you can't see it on the sheet. But if you look at our local youth shelter and you look at the staffing of it, this comes from their annual report. You can see that they're staffed in a way that is balancing immediate needs with long-term solutions. And so their staff positions like outreach, case management, ensure that the shelter can manage the day-to-day tasks such as the organizing efforts. And then development and program management staff are essential for the sustaining of the shelter. And then the shelter staff, staffing often focuses on immediate needs, providing shelter, food, and basic outreach. But I can tell by looking at this that there's no focus on long-term solutions. There's not a focus on mental health. There's not a focus on education. Remember those things we were talking about, which are the causes of these things? So this is where the community could be stepping up and plugging in some of these gaps, is that we need to have a lot of support around mental health and around education for kids who are severely emotionally disturbed and severely mentally ill. The rest of the kids are what we call low-hanging fruit. They're going to be kids who aren't following rules because they don't want to. It turns into a behavior problem. But the kids who are maybe willing but incapable, we need to have a level of support for them. We need to have willing but incapable. We still need to have a level of support for them. And the unwilling but capable, which is what we see majority of the couch surfing, is the unwilling but capable. So they can do, they just don't want to do. And so that would be addressed by a bunch of smart adults getting in the room and going, how do you motivate a kid who doesn't want to do? And then you come up with ideas and you try things, and then you go back and you come up with more ideas and you try things until you figure out something that works. One of the things that I've worked on with Dr. Bob for many, many years is token systems. So you can create motivation systems specific to certain populations and around certain behaviors that you want to see. But we would have to make that effort as the adults. The youth will not do that to themselves. Next slide. And so some of the kids that I was just speaking of, the severe emotionally disturbed, the severe mentally ill, these are kids who are going to need lifelong housing and care. Years and years ago, Dr. Bob said something to me, and it's kind of something that I resonate on around stuff like this, is most of the kids we come across are bent. We're gonna have to help bend them back into shape, but sometimes we run across kids who are broken, and they're always going to need help forever. They're never gonna be able to live on their own. If they do, it will be all bad. So they need specialized lifelong housing, like permanent supportive housing. And they also need mental and physical health care. So they're gonna probably have to have people in their units occasionally, putting eyes on them, making sure that they are walking fine, that they don't notice things that maybe the client hasn't reported, but needed to be known by the supportive staff. And so permanent supportive housing is critical for those mentally ill youth who have schizophrenia, who just plain never develop to a state where they can manage their own home, that they can manage their own appointments. They're always going to need help. So these youth will never be able to live on their own, but that doesn't mean they don't deserve dignity, safety, and a chance to live a life with some stability. If we don't start talking about realizing this type of housing, these youth are going to be stuck in a cycle of homelessness and instability forever. Next slide. So these are the key actions for lasting change. We have to advocate for affordable youth housing. And when we advocate for it, we have to advocate for the level of rent we want. We have to say very specifically, we want to serve 20% AMI youth, or we want to serve youth that have no money to pay rent. Like, we have to be very specific, otherwise we get caught up in they're providing affordable housing to youth, and then we go and look at it and it's 60% AMI. That's not affordable to most youth, especially not homeless youth. And so mental health and social supports, we need to increase the amount that we have available. I mean, and yet we can't get a right now appointment anywhere for any of the girls. So we're usually waiting a week to 3 weeks for an appointment, and that's through connections we have because they trust that our girls will show up. If prior to having that reputation, we would sometimes have to wait 1 to 3 months for an appointment. And that's getting a youth on medication, getting them stabilized. So they're kind of unmanaged and dysregulated that entire time. So we're hoping they don't kill themselves. We're hoping they don't run away. We're hoping they don't hurt another person or commit a crime, something like that. So that it's very dangerous for them to have to wait these long periods of time. And then education and employment readiness, spending time with the young person so that you understand what they're even ready for. So you're not putting them into levels of skills training and education that they can't complete. They've been rejected so much that it's really important that we spend that time with them, maybe do some assessment with them to really understand where we need to start with them with education, how much support, tutoring, that kind of thing they need to achieve, even the right school. Like, some schools you have to go to in person, you see the teacher standing in front of you, get a lot of in-person help. Some schools are online. And so you want to make sure you're not putting a kid in an online school who's not going to benefit from that, who's plainly not going to go because no one's making them go. They're not participating in the class because heck, they don't really want to. They don't want to do that work. So we have to take that extra step and treat them like we would our own kids. And then the modern specialized education for Gen Z, like learning about this population, learning what they respond to. It's a very digital generation. They don't like a lot of in-face contact. So keeping that in mind, how can we create curriculum? How can we engage with them on their terms so that we can engage with them and connect with them? And then next slide. And so you can make a difference. Of course, the easiest way to make a difference for, people who have it is to just donate to an outcomes driven program, not in outputs, but outcomes, maybe somewhere where you're seeing a certain percentage successfully completed, have a definition of success, that you can see some, how many graduated, how many got jobs, how many saved money. You want to start seeing some outcomes like that. It's comforting to know that the organization's paying attention to those things because those are actually the indicators that they're in better shape than they were when they found us. Otherwise, you can serve somebody for a very long time and they could be leaving your place in the same shape that they entered your place at. And then get to know a homeless youth. I mean, that's easy enough if you're out for a walk or in your church, or make an effort to get to know one. Ask them out for coffee. Ask them to go for a walk with you down the river. Ask questions to them as you see things on the river that you don't understand. Make a list of questions, that you would like to ask a young person. So young people, we have a t-shirt that says, ask me, I know things, I'm young, ask me, I know things, I'm old. So the young ones wear the young ones and we wear the older ones, but we all know things. And I think it's a great way to figure out, where can I help? What can I do? You might even just be helping that young person, but that young person becomes the starfish, in your life. And so it's worth it.
Monica?
Yes.
Get to know. Is there any connection between homeless programs and Big Brothers Big Sisters, which is a whole program devoted to mentoring? I mean, that's the whole.
Sure.
Is there any connection? The Big Brothers Big Sisters, do they deal with homeless kids, or do you know? Or not, or?
I don't believe they deal with homeless kids because they have to get parental permission to big sis or big brother a kid. So I don't believe that they're helping, homeless youth. But when we did the homeless point in time count, the youth point in time count in 2021, one of the questions we asked is about crossover. How many, have you ever been to the Boys and Girls Club? Have you ever been Big Brother, I've been at the Big Brother, Big Sister program. And I thought it was interesting that we had a lot of crossover into those programs. So kids who had at one time been served by those programs were now experiencing homelessness. I don't know exactly what that correlation means.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there any rewards program for achievements?
I think it's particular to if you're involved with, so I know in foster care, if you get your high school diploma, they give you $200. And so I think you need to be part of something that has chosen to give rewards. So we use the token economy system at ENYA. So we reward you accomplishing your programming assignments. Your participation in the program is rewarded with what we call tokens. Tokens are then turned in for items. So you would collect your points and then you would turn your point in for your bus pass, for your cell phone payment, for a right now ride, for something you want to purchase from Amazon, for a late curfew, for an out of town trip. So we created an economy to teach them reciprocation, because otherwise they come in and say, my phone needs to be paid. And standing in front of you, I need new shoes. And so we have to take them from that mindset to how can I barter for shoes, or how can I negotiate for shoes, or how can I use what I have to get shoes? And so it puts them more in the game. Yeah, but that would be very specific to the programs. But I encourage incentivization until achievements are good enough, and that does happen. So after girls come into the program and receive so many incentives and start to achieve and finish high school, then the achievement is good enough for them. The feeling of I finished high school is way greater than any token I can give them. And so we just have to get them to those achievements, and then they start feeling like I don't need to be paid to do everything for myself. But until that happens, there's a level of almost, in these youth now, the Gen Z youth, there's almost a level of, they feel like the world gave it to them, and they can give it back to the world, and you're part of it. So there's this energy that you kind of have to meet, calm down, and then you can work with them. But they come in with the chip on their, like, it's a chip to protect themselves. Like I said, the reality of their world, it's dangerous. Adults can't be trusted. People are liars. Everyone's trying to get my money. It's a much different world than it was when we were their age.
So as vague as it is, you wind up dealing with hope. I mean, you have to find a way
Yes,
to get more hope into some of these kids. Hope for a better day,
yep,
a better life.
yep. That we talk about that a lot. That's what it is you're a hope hype man. Hey, what are you doing today? Are you excited? Like, because they're not. And so you have to kind of go in and build that up in them. Like, who would be excited about being homeless? Who would be excited about living in a program where you don't know anybody, where it's all these strangers who have made all these promises and agreements to you, but other adults have done the same thing and disappointed you. So here we go again. They're simultaneously looking for another place to live while they're living there because they don't know if this is gonna work out or not. So it's hope that we deal in. It's very, we talk about that. I'm glad you brought that up. Be a positive influence. So engage with youth who feel hopeless. Act as a positive adult and good parent, offering guidance and accountability. Don't try to sleep with them. Don't try to get them to do anything weird for you. Don't try to manipulate them or take advantage of them. You'd be surprised how many adults they know that don't do that to them. And so they need more of those adults in their lives. And then encourage accountability. Talk to youth about using available services effectively. Show up, collect the resources, and make the most of opportunities. It's not a shortage of opportunities that I see happening. It is an inability to make the most of the opportunity, whether it's their attitude, their mental illness, whether it's they don't know how to problem solve around the opportunity today. They don't know how to make the most of these opportunities. So we can step up by helping them understand that. And then I would encourage you to read the white paper if you have it. It's got actionable recommendations like Dr. Murphy mentioned, and I gave the link of where that can be found. Next slide. And then, so youth homelessness is a crisis. It's staggering right now, and housing and support are key, and we can all play a role. And I printed out some how we can help kind of back in the room. So if anyone wants to take that when they leave, I put something together. Other than that, I mean, the last slide is my contact information. And if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, my contact information is there. You're welcome to reach out to me anytime you like. You're welcome to come over for a tour if that's something you're interested in.
Where are you located?
We're up at the college, so we're right off Sierra and College Drive. Yeah.
Okay, well, very good. Well, Monica, thank you very much for a very enlightening presentation. I hope we understand the program and the problem a great deal better. So,
I hope so. I was able to help a little bit on that.
Kids coming with Brew and D, is there a
Yes.
program to help? That makes it hard to get a job, kills your self-esteem, all these other things.
Yeah.
Is there a program to try to get them dental?
No, there's not. All of our Medicaid funded dental programs are emergency only. So of course, if they're having, you know, some sort of abscess, something like that, they could possibly get an extraction, but they're not gonna have any type of, you know, root canals or crowns. The saving of the teeth is not gonna happen. And also there's no one saying we're willing to do dentures. That would have to be a private dentist that would just kind of offer that up out of their office. And of course, they wouldn't want to be bombarded by every single person who would need that after. And so they're kind of hesitant to put an offer like that out because next thing you know, they have 20 more people wanting it. So no, we don't have, you know, a way to salvage young people's teeth. So you're right, they will be without teeth, and then that's cosmetically hard for them because, you know, your looks are really important to you when you're young. You really do seek out a lot of external validation. So yeah, it's, and the pain that they're in. Like I have a girl right now in the program who is having a hard time getting any sleep right now because of the pain that she's in waiting for a dentist appointment. Yeah.
Well,
One metaphor that I'll never forget, somebody said, imagine a big door, a big heavy door, and over the door is lifetime of poverty. And imagine the way a young person gets through that door, and it's teenage pregnancy. Unmarried teenage pregnancy can oftentimes be the entrance to a lifetime of poverty, more children, more poverty. Do any of the homeless programs deal with that in particular? Sexual education, contraception, whatever, with young runaways and homeless youth?
I know in our program, we do a pregnancy contract. So when they come in, we're asking them, how are you gonna avoid becoming pregnant? So we're not telling them not to have sex. We're just saying, if you're gonna have sex, how are you gonna make sure that you're not getting pregnant, you're not getting STDs? I don't know of anyone right now that is like any type of program that is being kind of delivered within the community to young people, like giving out condoms, talking about safer sex, talking about family planning instead of unplanned pregnancies. I'm not even sure if Planned Parenthood has an aggressive campaign anymore. Many years ago, we had many organizations out doing that. And I did recognize in the last point in time count that we did in 2021, that there were a large number of young people who were not using condoms to have sex, didn't believe in them. So I could absolutely see we're not going out there and pushing that education has now led them to believe in a myth. And so I would expect, if we looked at it, the STDs are up right now, pregnancies up right now, but I don't have those stats for you for Nevada. We're just not doing a good job right now at keeping statistics on our young people in Nevada. We're so hyper-focused on adult homelessness that we're just not using any of our county staff, all of our academic, our social workers, people, we're not using any of them in the youth services, like homeless youth services, yeah. All right.
Michelle, do we have any questions in the chat?
We do, Kevin. Thank you for asking. Monica, there's one question that I think you partially addressed, but I wonder if you might have more to say on this question. Does your program focus on the behavioral modification you've shown is necessary?
Our program is designed for willing and capable young women who want to finish high school, want to get a good job, want to live in cooperative housing. So all of our supports that we do and the way that we interact with the girls supports that. So if they come in and they are mired in mental illness and they don't have any management around that, and their management is basically acting out on everyone around them, we're not equipped to deal with that. So what we would do is be talking to that client about possibly inpatienting themselves to get better managed, to get better medicated, or talking about a higher level of care, which would be like a mental health housing program, not an independent living skills housing program. So behavioral programming, we do it, but it is around more, for example, we provide a lot of social and emotional support in the house. So one of the things that we do is teach them a communication style called radical candor, which is personally caring, but still direct challenging. So when they come in, we'll validate what they're feeling, but we'll still continue to show we care and challenge them at the same time. If they deteriorate under that approach, they're not appropriate for our program. They need a higher level of care, meaning I'm resistant, I don't want to do my part. I want everyone to just kind of cave, give in, give me my way right now. That is not someone who's going to do well at our program, and they need to be around more mental health staff who would be providing that higher level of behavioral health programming. I hope I answered that.
Yes, I think you did. Thank you. And that is the only question in the chat that I'm seeing.
Are there group homes for kids that really need help, that will give out the medications to them if they're on psych meds, et cetera?
For minor homes, there are. So for under 18, there are medical homes within the community where are these mental health medical homes where they're staffed with doctors and nurses, and people are making sure they're getting their medications daily. But what I would just say to that is that once you turn 18, you are allowed to make your own choices for yourself. And those choices can include, I don't want to take my meds. I don't want to go to that doctor anymore. I don't like what you've been making me do. And I want to do it my way. And that happens with a lot of young people who turn 18 who feel like they've had a heavy hand in their life for a long time and they haven't been able to make a lot of their own choices, even if it was for their best interest and it was the right thing to do. When they turn 18, it's just same with, if you have an 18-year-old in your house, once they go from 17 to 18, and now they don't want to come home at 18, they don't have to come home at 18. But at 17, they're incorrigible. The cops can come and they can make them follow your house rules because they're minors. But once they turn 18, they get a say in their life. And that's why it's really important that we're teaching them how to have proper reciprocating relationships, that we're teaching them how to keep their side of the street clean. We're teaching them how to be responsible for their own self. We're teaching them about self-imposed rules. We all have self-imposed rules, right? Like we have certain times we go to bed, certain ways we keep our house, certain things that we do and don't do to keep our life in order, to keep us safe. And so it's conveying those thoughts and helping them implement that within their own lives. And when you have kind of an out of control kid who then turns 18 years old, now you have a whole other problem on your hands, because what's waiting for them out there is the CARES campus, is the local youth shelter. And when you don't want to follow rules there and you want to defy staff there, then the police get called. And now you're escalating up into, criminal levels. So we're not doing our kids any favor by sheltering and shielding them from their own accountability in their life. We're actually hurting them.
I remember a conversation I had in the kitchen over at Enya with one young woman, and we were talking about cooking. And I asked her something, and she said, well, in my foster home, I wasn't allowed to go in the kitchen. And she was there for several years. And she was 18 now, 19. She was starting off from how do you boil an egg? I mean, she didn't know anything about cooking.
The liability, you have to choose them. Are we going to protect, or are we going to take the chances that they could get hurt and we could get sued? So there's all these things that we kind of have to hit the drawing board and talk about and say, how do we mitigate this risk without taking the entire experience from them? Because if our job is to help them be prepared for independent living by the time of 18, how do we structure our homes to allow for those experiences that will ensure that? And that, again, falls back on the adults. That's our child welfare system and its inadequacies. And so we have a lot of work to do. Yeah.
Michelle, it looks like there might be 3 other comments or questions in the chat. Is that true?
No, they're not questions. I dropped the link to the white paper that Monica referred to into the chat, and then I also added her contact information that was on that last slide in case it was not readable for people. But that's the entirety of it.
I would just mention one more thing. The white paper, she dropped the link, but it can be found at washouhousingjusticeunion.org. And on that site, there are a lot of really cool resources that we've created. Like one of them is a card that we give out to homeless people to stay under the radar. It's almost like if you're gonna choose to be unsheltered, do it this way. So that, you know, like clean up after yourself, don't be a jerk to people. If someone asks you to move, move. And so it's like a little card. There's another one on opioids and basically all the links to all of the different substance abuse places. And also what using Narcan, every time that you use Narcan gives you a little bit of a brain damage, and we're not really talking about that right now. And I have run into kids who are opioid users, and it's like every time I see them, they're just a little slower than the last time I saw them, and I don't know that they can repair these things. And so if you were to check out that page, you'll see some really cool things that were designed by NEP and the Karma Box Project. And so they're very forward, modern type of resources and accurate. Yeah. And if you, like I said, if you have my name, my number, if you need anything, just let me know.
Terrific. Well, thank you again.
Thank you.
And, I think she did very good.